So, as the saying goes, a good beginning makes a good ending. During the interview, it's so typical that as the very first step, we as candidates are asked to tell the interviewer about ourselves. And as one of the most common interview questions, self-introduction is the very common one, but it also seems to be the one that we always falter in. So this sort of brings me back to the initial quote at the start. A good beginning makes a good ending, from which I do infer that it's so critical that we get this one right at the onset. And even though this is commonly called like an icebreaker question, I do personally tend to handle this quite seriously. So Lyndon, could you please advise, what do you think an interviewer or hiring manager is exactly typically wanting to know or examine about a candidate through this question? And even though, our resume or cover letter would presumably already cover a bit of a ground about ourselves and our background qualifications during the earlier screening process. So why would it need to ask this question? What they're actually after to learn about us?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? I mean, they say that it's a way of putting the candidate at ease by not getting straight into the very difficult technical questions, perhaps about the role, or very detailed questions about your experience. So it's a way to establish some sort of rapport with interviewers. But of course, it's very difficult for most people just to talk about themselves in that way. At the same time, we know the absolute critical importance of a first impression and making a very good first impression, because we tend to make very quick judgments about people, usually within the first 15 to 30 seconds of meeting someone. We've already made up a lot of our decisions about whether we like this person, whether we think that they're someone that we can get on with, how professional they are. So that first question is your opportunity to make a really good first impression. And the good thing about it is, if you prepare that and you are very confident in your delivery of it, not only does it create a good first impression, but it also helps you feel more positive and confident for the rest of the interview as well. So it's a great way, if you're ready for it and you can do a good job, for you to give yourself the best start to answering the rest of the questions as well. So what are they exactly looking for? Well, apart from giving you this opportunity to ease your way into the interview, it's really just a chance to see how you present yourself. What do you emphasize when you talk about yourself? How organized are you in the way that you present your experience or skills, for example? What is it that you're prepared to share and happy to share about yourself? So they're learning a lot about you in those first minute or two of the interview. So it's something that we spend a lot of time with our clients on developing and practicing this opening pitch, as we call it, or elevator pitch, to make sure that it's as effective as it can be.
Yeah, fantastic insights. And I do take it that it is an icebreaker, but this is also exactly where the examination starts. It starts right here. We can't afford to go to casual or wishy-washy. And I'd also take it that this is also a potentially good opportunity for the recruiter to examine the alignment, one between their predisposed image after viewing our submissions in the application, and what you sort of practically and virtually manifested through this interview in the way you present yourself and you articulate your alignments and potentials. So yeah, useful vetting process, I take it.
It is. And remember, so your skills and your experience and the things that the technical side of the job has already been presented in your application documents, as you said. So it is interesting. So they're going to ask a lot of questions about that, but that's where the whole other side of the interview comes into play. It's not just about your technical skills, especially here in Australia. Employers are looking for much more than just technical skills. They're looking for someone who is a good communicator so they can become an effective member of a team. They're looking for someone who has initiative and confidence so that they can see that the sort of person that if they have a problem when they're doing their job, they feel confident to go and ask someone about it. Or they have the confidence to go and support another team member if they can see someone else is struggling. So there are a whole lot of other qualities which, apart from your just technical skills, which you've picked up through your studies, which they're also assessing. And so all of these things need to be conveyed in the way that you give your answers as well.
Yeah, so on that note, what are the non-technical dimensions are so essential that we must integrate them into this elevated pitch in an explicit or non-explicit way? Could you please share probably a simple formula to help us craft a very competent elevated pitch so that we effectively get it across as to who we are, what we aspire for, and what other things are there we do that we have vested interest in?
All right. So we know that employers are looking for someone to fill a particular role. In other words, to perform particular functions or to do particular tasks within their company. So it might be doing some estimating. It might be helping out with organising the contracts for the subcontractors. It might be to do some design work on some aspect of the building. So they have a particular task that they need, or set of tasks that they need someone to help them with. They have that problem. And how do we know what they are? Of course, from the job advertisement or from the position description document, if there was one attached to the role, as there sometimes is. So that's your first step, is to read that job ad or position description very carefully to know exactly what it is they want you to do. They are the things which you need to emphasize in your opening pitch, that you have those skills that they're looking for. Right from the start, you're going to include those in the opening pitch, and they'll be different from every job. So that the crucial thing is really to spend time looking at the job ad and study what it is they're looking for, and keep on coming back to those in the interview.
For the sake of timekeeping, how long do you reckon this introduction should last for? And how do we avoid sort of reciting the resume or cover letter, which of course we could understand would have been scrutinized already by the hiring manager? So how do we make sure that this is an intriguing pitch and it's also, as you said, relevant to the exact position?
All right, so the opening pitch can be delivered over the telephone if you get a phone call from a recruiter, for example, or it might be also asked in the face-to-face interview. And so the lengths are different for each of those. It's much harder for someone to listen to a long talk over the telephone because you don't have the visual engagement. So when you give your opening pitch over the telephone call to a recruiter or a hiring manager, we suggest it's no longer than 60 seconds. So that's actually quite short. And most people, their first versions of their opening pitches tend to be much longer than that, as they try to fit in as much as they can that they think's important. So this is something that you're going to really need to work on and edit right down. In a face-to-face interview, we suggest maybe 90 seconds, especially if you're someone who's a recent graduate, you don't have as much experience to talk about. You should be able to fit that into about 90 seconds. What you don't want is for them to start to get a bit bored and a bit impatient or restless, or to start thinking about what they're going to cook for dinner that night because you're starting to go on. So we want to keep it as short as possible to keep them interested and then move on to the next questions. Let's talk about the structure, because that's really what's going to support you in giving the answer. And we teach a 4-part structure. So let's talk about the structure that we're going to use for this opening pitch, which is the thing which is going to help you stay in the time limit and also present yourself very professionally and in a very organized way. So we use a 4-part structure. There are 4 parts to this structure. The first part is just to quickly thank the interviewers for inviting you along for the discussion. So you just can say something like, well, first of all, I just want to thank you for inviting me for today's interview. Just very simple like that, but that's just acknowledging the fact that you have this opportunity and you're grateful for it. So having done that, we move straight into a sentence where you introduce yourself, because that's what they're essentially asking you to do by asking you to talk about yourself. It's a self-introduction. So you're just going to start off by saying, well, as you know, my name is Langdon, and I am a, and then you're going to label yourself with whatever job title you think is relevant for this job that you're applying for. So in your case, you might be saying, I'm a graduate engineer, or I am a civic engineer, or I am a designer, or whatever the role is that you're applying for. And then you tack onto that something talking about the skills that they're looking for. And remember, we talked about the importance of looking at that job ad and understanding exactly what skills they're looking for. we're going to mention them here. So we're going to say, so my name is Langdon, and I am a graduate engineer with skills in project forecasting and scheduling, and in managing variations, and also I have skills in AutoCAD. So you're just going to mention 3 things which you know that they care about straight up. And that's our little introductory sentence. That's the second part of the structure. The third part of the structure is you are going to talk through your history, your experience and qualifications chronologically. So this is one way it's going to be different from the resume, because in a resume we usually go in reverse order, right? So we're usually putting the most recent things first. When we introduce ourselves in this third section, we're going to talk through from the first thing that happened to the next thing to the next thing. So you might start off like this by saying, well, in terms of my background, I completed a Bachelor of Engineering about 3 years ago, or mention where it was or when it was, where I did major projects in design or construction methods or materials or project management, or talk about a little bit about what some of the focus of that course was. After I completed my bachelor degree, I worked for a while. You maybe have some work experience there that you want to mention very briefly, and then move on to the masters that you've completed or that you are completing. So I'm currently, or I've just completed masters in engineering from Deakin University, from Monash University, from University of Melbourne, wherever it is, RMIT, where I did major projects in, again, you mentioned a few things, hopefully things which are, again, relevant for the job ad, relevant for the role that you're applying for. You're trying to always make connections between your experience, the skills that you've developed in your studies, and what they're looking for, because that's what's going to sell you effectively to them. So very short, this section might only go somewhere between 30, 40 seconds, up to about a minute if it's in a face-to-face interview situation, where you have maybe 90 seconds to present yourself. So just talking through those main projects that you've done as part of your studies to emphasize your skills. That's the third part. The fourth part is you start off with what you are currently doing. So now you're going to say, well, currently I am just completing my master's in engineering from such and such university, and I'm looking for my first role in the construction industry. I saw this role advertised and it looked like a fantastic opportunity for me. I've had a look at your website and I can see that you're doing a lot of major construction projects that look really exciting. There's the major development in Richmond with the apartment buildings there, and you also got a construction project going on in Essendon that looks really fascinating as well. So I can see you doing a lot of really exciting projects, and I'm really keen to learn more. Thank you. So what you're doing with that last section is showing that you have done your homework, you have looked at the company, you understand what they do, and you're really excited by this opportunity, and you want to discuss it more with the interviewers.
For the candidates who have a background of being an international students or skilled migrants, when we stocktake our overseas experience, how can we crop this so that it sounds more scalable and easily construed in the Australian context so that people understand the magnitude and complexity of the project you would have been able to handle from your previous experience?
If someone has overseas experience, that's still experience. Sometimes we can be careful about how we talk about it, because if you just say, I did a construction project in India or Malaysia or whatever it was, that can unfortunately produce a negative idea in some people's minds, because they think, oh, okay, maybe the construction standards were different, maybe the construction methods or the protocols or whatever the processes are different, so maybe not so relevant for us. So sometimes you may not want to mention the country. You can just say, I assisted with a major construction project where I did such and such and such, and not even mentioning the country where it took place. Of course, they can ask about that and they might be able to see it on your resume, but we don't need to emphasize it when we're giving the answer. But the key thing about understanding the size of it, or as you said, the scope, is to give some of the quantifiable details around it. Now, this gets tricky if you talk about a price for or cost for the whole project, because the exchange rate might not make it sound as impressive as it would. Like it might have been a $3 million project, for example, that you're working on, but that because of the exchange rate, if that project was built in Australia, it might be a $12 million project. So sometimes if you can't talk about it in the financial terms, I would be talking about it in terms of other aspects or other scopes, like the number of square meters, or the number of levels in the building, or it was a residential building for with 20 apartments. So you're giving a really clear idea about the size of the project that you're working on, if you don't want to talk about it through a financial thing. But at least they can get a sense of the scale and therefore the weight that they can give that experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I reckon it sort of all comes down to playing your cards strategically. And on that note, I truly believe that the audience, if you're interested, you can certainly book a session of consultation with Langdon and the other experienced career coaches at CSA to get better insights. And also, I believe they will be able to tailor your personalized elevator pitch to help you, to give you a boost in the interview at the very first step. Yeah, so thank you very much, Langdon, for this episode. I believe we've all learned a lot, and we hope to take these insights and ideas on board to get the things done right at the very onset. And absolutely, we're looking forward to the next episodes. See you later.
Thanks, Daisy.